I'm Joshua Adams, and this is the Industry Insights Podcast, where I am joined in the Rock Paper Simple studio by community leaders as we dive into industry topics and perspectives. Thanks for joining us today. I have Buz Underill. Now, Buz, we've known each other for about 5 years, I think, through C12, CEO Roundtable for Christian-owned businesses. That's been a lot of fun. So I've got to see a lot of your endeavors, your adventures with Squid Lips and Hospitality Life and a lot of the other things that you do in the community. But you've also been here for a long time. You've been here your whole life, I believe?
Just about. I came here when I was 3.
That counts. That counts. That counts. We're not going to talk about how long ago that was.
No, thank you.
We used to be friends, huh? And so through that time, you've seen a lot of change, a lot of evolution of really Brevard County as a whole.
Yes.
But we're going to focus a bit today on downtown Melbourne and kind of the evolution of that. And so why don't you tell me a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. When I first came here, downtown Melbourne was vibrant. It was small. There wasn't very many people around, but there was a lot of stuff going on. They closed at noon on Wednesday and noon on Saturday, and we sometimes had to go to Orlando to get things that we wanted because you couldn't find it in Brevard County, and it certainly wasn't in Brevard County in Melbourne. And but things changed over the years, and in about 1970-ish, the mall was built in the 70s. And when the mall was built, the old downtown Melbourne emptied out, and there wasn't hardly anybody in there. And then it started filling back up with some of the businesses that liked the lower rent, but everybody was going to the mall. Once the mall came in, we didn't have to go to Orlando, or actually Merritt Island. I think Merritt Island Square was in there a little bit sooner.
Okay.
But I, like I said, I remember growing up in the downtown area, and I had an opportunity. I was traveling a lot to Orlando for some of my certification classes and stuff. And about the same time, downtown Orlando had the same problem. People were going out to malls, but also to Disney. Kind of sucked some of the life out of the old downtown Orlando area on it. And they started a project there called Church Street Station. And in Church Street Station, there was a kind of a bar restaurant called Rosie O'Grady's. And that was where all the action took place in Orlando at the time. And I'd go over there and I'd see that and I said, man, that's really, really neat. Melbourne could use something like that. So I ended up buying the old Flatiron building in downtown Melbourne. And the Flatiron building was a location where I used to get my hair cut when I was a little kid. The Wags Barbershop was there. And there was also I think Jennings clothing store was there, and I'd go there for that. And my dentist was on the second floor, and it had become in disrepair and got I don't know if there's anything going on in there. There may have been something, but anyway, I bought it with the idea that I was going to do something very similar to Rosie O'Grady's on a smaller scale, and we designed it, and it was going to be called Scarlett O'Hara's, and we're going to make something happen to downtown Melbourne. And everybody talked about making changes to downtown Melbourne so that we would get commerce back in there. And nothing ever really took place. So I was involved in the Chamber of Commerce, and because I had a vested interest in the downtown.
Of course you did.
I volunteered to be on their downtown redevelopment committee. And I did that for a year or two or so, and we never could get any traction. And you couldn't get any traction because the Chamber of Commerce really didn't have any ability to make anything happen other than to promote something and try to get people interested in doing that. And it became apparent to me that we needed to do something different. And about the same time, one of my close friends and somebody that also grew up he was in my kindergarten class, and we grew up together and went to school and graduated from Melbourne High. And then we went off to the University of Florida and graduated. And he started a law firm, and his law firm was moving along. And he had a desire to be the city attorney. And so it was Jim Ryman and the Ryman Harrell Law Firm. And he wanted to be the city attorney. And I wanted to make something happen with the downtown. And we had another individual, Bob Mitchell, who was had been in the police force, and he had some run in with the chief of police and was no longer there, and so he wanted to. I think that was Chief Bob Catrone, if I'm correct on that, and so he wanted to replace that and replace the chief of police, and Jim Ryman and Bill Harrell wanted to become the city attorney, and I wanted to do something with downtown. So we were able to put together a group and brought Harry Good in and a couple of others, and were able to get enough votes on city council to control city council. And so as a result, Ryman brought in Harvey Poe to be interim city attorney for a while. And I got them to create a downtown redevelopment agency at that time. And they put me in charge of that and allowed me to pick the people we want to do. So we got stakeholders in there. We had Joe Marto, who was president of Flagship Bank. We had the president of Sun Bank at the time, and a few others. And we needed to find one of the other interests in the downtown area was the Merchants Association. And one of the problems we were going to have with the Merchants Association is that the reason most of those merchants were down there, with a few exceptions, was because the rent's real cheap. And the rent real cheap because nobody wanted to come downtown Melbourne anymore. So we needed somebody to be on the committee that represented the Merchants Association. So we asked Dennis Meehan to come in on that. So Dennis became part of that committee. And so we started the whole process of doing a public-private partnership, setting up a tax increment district to fund the public improvements there, and brought in a guy by the name of Cy Pommier that worked in Reston, I think Columbia, Maryland, to come in and help do the design work. And so we started moving forward with the downtown redevelopment. Because of the politics, we had to include Algali also at the time.
So you did a coup, took over the government.
Mm-hmm. Basically,
that's what I heard. That's what I heard.
That's exactly.
But it was really wild to hear kind of the evolution of, hey, there's this idea, try to do it. It wasn't quite happening. And I think some of the story there is you got a community around it. The community said, hey, we want to see something different here.
Well, we did something different.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to see it to be revitalized, but nobody had the ability to make anything happen except for government.
Right.
And so government had to get involved in it because they had the ability to take property by eminent domain and create parking lots on it. They had the ability to utilize tax dollars. And one of the things I don't know if you're familiar with a tax increment financing method, is what they do is they freeze the tax base, and every incremental amount of taxes that come in off of that area that is in that TIF zone goes back into put improvements into it. And so the idea was that as the area improved and values went up, the tax base would go up, and that incremental difference would go into help fund the infrastructure. Infrastructure. But nobody could do that but government. And so that's why it was important for us to do that. And so we had to set that up and determine what that area was going to be, and then what does it look like? What do we want to see? And we had hearings, and like I said, we had consultants, and it there was a lot of emotions, people upset. I had the wife of one of the attorneys there, whose son was my roommate in college, come and spit in my face when I came out of one of the meetings in there and said I was part of the mafia coming to take their properties away. And so it was a contentious time. There was a lot of excitement in some of the meetings. It was cool, but we were able to get it through and get it financed and started the process so people could see what was going to happen. And part of that was we said, the whole area is going to be restaurants and bars, and entertainment is going to take over what's going on. And we were told, there's articles in the Today paper, one of the prominent brokers in the area had said, it's a waste of time and effort. Nobody's going to not go to the mall to come to downtown Melbourne. But all you have to do now is drive down there and try to find a parking place on some of the stuff.
You cannot park down there, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, what our vision worked out, it took us a long time to do that. It maybe wasn't exactly what we had in mind, but it never would have happened had government not got involved in it and been very supportive in helping us achieve what we wanted to achieve down there.
So looking back on that story of getting things moving, of rallying the right people together to make change. Looking back on that, what are some lessons? What are some things you might have done differently? What are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There were one of the things I would have done for sure, and we talked about it. We tried to do it, and we just didn't get the traction we needed. Is parking. We knew that at some point in time that parking would be a big issue, and that was a real fight because to do that we had to go through, for the most part, eminent domain. We had to either have somebody sell the property to it, which we did. The Sun Bank gave us the corner where Melby is, um, or we had to take it by eminent domain, and we had a lot of blowback from stakeholders in the area that didn't want to see that. That said, "Oh, nobody will ever come down. You're wasting the money. We're not going to do that. You shouldn't buy somebody else's property. Don't buy my property." And that was, looking back, we should have done that earlier on. We should have provided for more parking, and we didn't do that. And that was probably uh, one of the areas that we could have done a better job. We just didn't do it, and politics didn't allow us to do it. Probably more than anything else is the reason we didn't do
Right.
it. But you can see that today it would have been nice to have a lot more parking than what we have. So that was probably the biggest single thing. What surprised me a lot was um, the fact that so many people were against us developing downtown. A lot of headwinds on everything we did. A lot of accusations. A lot of very heated um, council meetings and agency meetings and everything else. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that some of these people that are in there realized that if we were successful, they wouldn't be able to pay the new rents because the values of the properties would go up and rents would go up.
Gotcha.
But I had not really anticipated all that. I thought everybody would embrace it with open arms, wanting to see us bring back the vibrancy of what used to be a pretty vibrant little area. And I was wrong, but it worked out.
What right. What thoughts do you have on just that idea in general of kind of looking at residents and saying, "Hey, you can influence where your town goes, where your city goes, where your county goes." What are some thoughts on how people can get involved, or just the idea of considering that? Because I think people don't realize they could have that kind of influence. The idea of what you did, I think, would scare a lot of people, frankly. But how would you encourage others to say, "Hey, you can step up, you can make an impact, you can make a difference, you can take us in a new direction"?
Yeah, well, you certainly can. And there's always a small number that show up on everything, and most of those are naysayers, and most of the people that you see are not visionaries, and they have an impact. Although a lot of times it's not a good impact. They sometimes sidetrack things that would be good for the community and good for the large percentage of the people in the area on it because they are vocal and they're there. And so I would encourage people that see something that looks good to come in and support it, because you can be sure that those naysayers that aren't in favor are going to be there and they're going to be loud. And so that's one of the things that we found that we needed to do is to organize some of those people that were in favor, so that those folks making the decision, the city councils or the county commissions or whoever's making those decisions, can see more of a balanced presentation rather than just looking at a vocal minority of people that are against something. And so I would encourage people, because it's normally those that are against that show up and are much more vocal than those that are in favor.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I think there can be a fear associated with things, and probably some very real concerns. Like, hey, these are things that could be a negative, or whether they are directly. There's always pros and cons to things, right? And so there's always going to be somebody that says that con is not worth it for me. I see the pro, but it's not worth it for me. And there's always that conversation of, okay, are enough people coming out that support this kind of thing?
Yeah. And part of that is just to be properly informed. So much of the negativity is that they don't really understand, and so they're dealing with rumors, or they just see a fraction of what's going on, and they need to have it fleshed out and explained to them. And sometimes when explained, it's not a good deal, and so not everything is good. But I encourage people to find out more about what's being proposed and dig a little deeper, and if they're in favor of it, to come out and support, because you do make a difference one way or another, and it's better if you can make an informed difference than an uninformed difference.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Looking at the journey with downtown Melbourne and where it is now, where it's going, what are some thoughts you have on where it's at now? What's different than what you envisioned? Right, you mentioned earlier there's some things that were different. What are some things that maybe turned out a little different than you expected, besides parking?
There are a lot more bars and restaurants than I had anticipated. I thought there would be a little more of a balance. There would be a little more retail in it. It would be more balanced than what it has turned out to be a little bit. That's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed. I assumed there would be more, and probably more mixed use. Although we're seeing some infill, we're seeing some more mixed use in there, and that the city did a good job of increasing the density to encourage more development there, to bring in residences and hotels and some other things on it. But I think there's just more. I would have expected more retail.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think it didn't materialize?
I don't really know. I sold the Flatiron building, and I sold it to one of my employees, and his daughter went in and put a restaurant called Pirate's Moon in there. Put Pirate's Moon in there, and once I sold it, I didn't have a whole lot more involvement in the downtown Melbourne. Didn't have that interest, and we had put together an assemblage with Melbourne Harbor, and we brought that into the downtown redevelopment area, and I ended up selling my interest in Melbourne Harbor, and so I haven't paid that much attention to it. And I come down here, and thank God for the parking garage. Other than that, I wouldn't find a place to park.
Right. So all this talk of downtown Melbourne, what about O'Galley?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, because the politics were involved. Melbourne had just merged with O'Galley, and so there was still this division between the Melbourne people and the O'Galley people, and that was everywhere, from those of us that went to school in Melbourne and those who went to school in O'Galley, and the people, the politics. It was different. And so when we put together the redevelopment agency, we wanted to. We needed to include people from O'Galley, so we went in and we picked up an individual. I believe his name is Herb Rector, who was very much involved and had property down in the old O'Galley area, and we created a downtown redevelopment plan for the old O'Galley area. And we started. We put some of the public improvements in there. We took along Highland, and we did a couple of those bump outs in there and started it. The O'Galley people wanted nothing to do with it. They wanted nothing to do with it. They were very vocal with with their merchant association and the politics. They wanted nothing to do with the development. So, and that made I was happy with that. So we got rid of them. And that was it. We said, we don't need to be in it if you don't want to be in it. So we got rid of them. And then when they started to see what happened in Melbourne, how it really was working, and they asked to come back in. And so they were brought back in. And for the past, 10, 15 years, I've sat on the redevelopment.
Oh, wow.
Committee. And so we make recommendations to the city. And so we've been involved, and downtown O'Galley is coming back, and it's made a lot of progress, and will continue to do so. But they wanted nothing to do with it. And those of us from Melbourne didn't particularly want to have anything to do with them anyway. So
we're seeing a trend here of kind of pushback initially on something.
Yeah.
There's a fear there's fear aspect, I think.
There was fear, and some of it's not understanding, but the ones that were vocal, the ones that thought they were going to have their ox scored. And that all of a sudden, if it's successful, I won't be able to stay here. I won't be able to compete. I won't be able to do that. Or, we had this thought, well, this is such a nice, quiet place now. When you do that, there's going to be traffic, there's going to be people, and it's going to disrupt my lifestyle, and we don't want that.
Right.
We don't want that. And so there's a combination of all of that, I think, in there involved. And it's, you can understand it. It's, I can understand it, but that's the pushback. And so things, take a while to go.
So as you had mentioned, it's making a resurgence, it's growing, it's continuing.
Yeah.
What do you see as the future down there?
Not enough parking. We're already there.
There's a recurring theme here.
We're in the process now of trying to do a high-rise parking there at the community center and where the old museum is.
Okay.
And so we're the city has been negotiating with the developer for the hotel that was supposed to go on the museum site for a high-rise mixed-use parking facility there, and that's been dragging along for a couple of years. And in the meantime, there's a lot of activity, a lot of construction activity going on, and plan to go down there, which is going to require a lot more parking. And so hopefully something will happen.
That's kind of the challenge with our narrow county here, and you get by the water and everything's crunched together. That space to build, space for parking, kind of got to go up.
Well, and that's one of the things, you want to maximize your use of your infrastructure. And so you need to go up, you need to increase the density to make sense out of all of it. But when you do that and you create businesses that become destination spots for people, they have to have a place to park. We don't have a robust public transportation system to be able to handle some of that. So most everybody that comes, they come by car for the most part. And so, where are they going to park? And there's a limit to how far people are willing to walk to go to any place, especially at night. And so those are things that need to be taken into consideration. And it's hard sometimes to get new businesses to come in if you can't provide parking for them or for their customers. So if you don't have, in the restaurant business, the key, if you don't have parking, you can't get customers. Without customers, you can't stay in business. And so, there's a need for that. And we certainly see that up in the Old Log Alley area, and you see that in downtown Melbourne too. I mean, it's and everywhere you go, it's not just here. Everywhere you go, that they don't make adequate provisions for parking, you have the same problem. And the problem is that most of the people making the decisions don't have the vision to really see how successful it could be, and so they don't plan in advance for the parking. And now you're in a situation where we don't have enough parking. How do we deal with it? And it becomes much more expensive, much more difficult to be able to accommodate that parking. So in many areas, you never see it. You don't see that parking.
So that idea and that concept of maybe not planning far enough ahead, or even having pushback against good ideas, or maybe fear around that, continues to happen. I mean, we're booming, right? We've got the space industry continues to grow. Viera is exploding. We have all these things, this growth happening here. We've got to be thinking about the future. How do you see that being affected now as all of this stuff is happening?
Well, you're talking about several different things. Viera does very well because that's a planned community. You remember, they didn't have people living there. It was cows, and they planned it out. And so you're not disrupting people's existence. Where you come to a redevelopment, just by the term of redevelopment, you're coming in and you're making change. And so you're coming into change into an area where people are already living, or they have their routines or have their business. And now you're disrupting that. And so then when you go through that disruption, you're going to have people that are not going to be happy about that. Viera, on the other hand, it's planned. People see what's happening. They've provided for those things that need to be done. So it's two different things that we're talking about there.
Right.
But we need to do a better job. First of all, is understanding that disruptions are going to have people that are not going to be very happy. How do we achieve what we want to achieve and minimize the disruption unless we provide a better alternative for them and have them understand that the disruption's temporary, but there's a benefit later on. Benefit in higher value and property or quality of life or whatever it might be. So there's more of a process on a redevelopment than there would be on any kind of a new planned community in there. But you're right. There's so much going on. There's so many folks coming in here that that are relatively high wage earners, some of them that come out of more urban areas that are expecting more from the area they live, and we'll support that. We just got to figure out what is the best way for us to deliver that to them in a way that makes sense.
Right. And it's a blend of those planned community situations as well as the redevelopment is what you're saying.
It is. It is.
So it's quite the journey. You've been on quite the journey here. You've gone from seeing and being inspired from something out in Orlando to seeing an area that was kind of not going anywhere and saying, hey, how can we bring this back? Organizing people around you for that. Bringing the government around that, developing different approaches to that, seeing that develop, exiting that situation, but then also seeing it grow without you over the years as well. So you've had quite the journey, both in it and kind of outside of it.
Well, really, in looking back, what's exciting to me is to remember how I saw it as a little boy growing up there. You know, walking down the streets and watching the guys from Rotary shining shoes to raise money for stuff, and I was throwing coins in the little pond with the goldfish and getting my hair cut and having no idea of where it would be today, or that I would have been instrumental in helping it move in that direction. So, I mean, I don't have any real lessons. It's just kind of an interesting mental journey for me to walk through.
No doubt. Well, thanks for joining me today, Buz.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Industry Insights. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, comment, or even drop us a line over at rockpapersimple.com.